What's up, Net Soldiers? I'm Net Alliance, and welcome back to the video, guys. Man, that is the end of The Mandalorian Season 1. I'm going to be going into spoilers in this video, like all my other Mandalorian reviews, videos. So if you haven't seen the episode yet, I recommend going to check it out first, then coming back and checking out this. Let me just jump into what my synopsis on the entire episode is, and then I'll give my thoughts. I thought there would be kind of more of a conflict after the last episode, because if you remember at the end of the last episode, Baby Yoda, or Yodi as I call him, he was taken by the Imperials, and I kind of thought that that was going to be a bigger issue in this episode. The IG unit comes back, as I predicted, and saves Yodi from the Imperials, so that was pretty cool. I thought it was cool to kind of make the Imperials look like they're real human beings. A lot of the time, stormtroopers are just kind of shown as being these like faceless, evil people. But as we can see in their quiet times, they are clearly just people. And some of them are buffoons. And when they started smacking Yodi, I'm like, oh man, IG's gonna show up and you guys are gonna be sorry. And he did show up and he saved them. So I thought that was a pretty funny scene. It was a pretty cool way to start the episode like that. Because like I said, we've seen stormtroopers being silly before, but we never actually seen them just kind of hanging out, just doing like nothing. You know what I mean? Now the show did a good job of humanizing them, but also making us not like them. And not every like movie and TV show are good at doing that, but I thought that they did a good job at that because yes, they made them look like humans and do like dumb stuff like a normal human would do when they're just waiting around waiting for like their orders or waiting to do something. But then they also had them like hitting Yodi at the same time, which of course made us go, okay, like you guys are kind of funny to watch, but I know you guys, like, you're gonna get your comeuppance and just waiting for it to happen. Then it happens, and then the IG unit saves Yodi, and he goes to save the rest of them. So that was a pretty cool opening scene, definitely. While this episode has a lot of cool moments in it, there are some kind of like very TV showy moments, and what I mean by that is like all of our characters are surrounded by dozens of stormtroopers, and they're just kind of out in the open. They're not behind cover. And they're like shooting a lot of people, and at first it makes sense because the IG unit comes out of nowhere, there starts taking like a bunch of stormtroopers out. That of course turns the stormtroopers to face the IG unit, which of course makes them vulnerable to the left side. And then that's when she starts kind of mowing them down with her little machine gun. Or I shouldn't say little, it's a pretty big gun. But she starts mowing them down with this machine gun. And then all the characters run out in the open and they just start shooting down all these stormtroopers. And there's still a bunch of stormtroopers in the background, just kind of like, where's the enemy? Where's the enemy? Like, they're right here, like right in front of them. And they're like, the enemy? Where's the enemy? Where's the enemy? I get it that, you know, amidst the chaos, maybe a couple of the troopers would kind of be like, you know, overwhelmed. But if you look in the background, it kind of like messes with the continuity of the entire episode because it's like, I'm sorry guys, but like, there wouldn't be that many stormtroopers just kind of like standing around like, oh, the battle? Where's the battle? Where's the battle? And I just think it's kind of silly. And it is very TV show-ish to do that type of thing because you don't want to kill off your main characters, even if you do kind of technically kill off your main character in this episode, but then he heals anyways. So it's like, that was kind of an unneeded scene. I get the idea of like making us feel like, oh, the Mandalorian's gonna die at the end of his season, so we're not gonna see any more seasons. Come on, I think they wanted to make the IG unit look even more cooler before his sacrifice, but I don't really know. Speaking of that then, they go into the sewers. The Mandalorian gets his little crest of the Mudhorn, and he also then gets his jetpack. And then they go down even deeper in the sewers to the lava river, ride the river out. They realize there's stormtroopers at the end of the tunnel, and the IG unit sacrifices himself to save them. So here's the thing about this episode. I really like this episode, but I don't know if I necessarily think it's better than last week's episode, which is interesting because more things kind of happen in this episode, but a lot of the stuff isn't as cohesive as it was in episode 7. I actually thought that episode 7 of The Mandalorian was the best episode we've gotten so far. Now this one comes along and I think it might be my second favorite episode so far, but I do think that episode 7 was a little bit better than this one. Not that this one's bad, but it definitely seems like it seemed like a really good finale, but there were some things missing. A couple different things that I would have done differently. For instance, when they all run out into the open, I would have actually had them run out into the open maybe, but I would have had them go into cover somewhere out in the open, so at least it was kind of more believable for why they weren't getting mowed down right away. Yeah, they took down a bunch of stormtroopers, but there were still at least like 24 of them left, just kind of out there and letting them live. So that was kind of rough. Not that it's bad, but it is kind of, like I stated, it does kind of detract from the overall danger aspect of the entire episode, because as I'm watching this, I know all these characters are getting out of here alive. At least if they were to kind of throw more believability into it, like have them actually go behind cover, then I would be more okay with it. But I have noticed that, and it is something that does kind of detract from the episode, in my opinion. Now, when we get to the IG unit sacrifice, I actually thought that was pretty sad. I really like the idea of him kind of teaming up with them and being part of a squad. Now, at the end of the episode, we find out that the Mandalorian doesn't actually even stay with them, or they don't even go with him. I thought that this was kind of like the beginning of a crew dynamic that we were going to see through the next season. But that, of course, didn't happen. In the beginning of the season, in episode 1, the IG unit almost kills the baby, and he plans to do it, but then, of course, the Mandalorian stops him, and then later on, he is trained to then protect the baby, and then he self-destructs to save the Mandalorian and the baby. So it's pretty cool how they kind of gave the droid a character arc in this, even though he really only shows up in episode 1 and technically episode 7 and episode 8, and that's the only episodes we see him, but he has a really good character arc compared to like the Mandalorian, who doesn't really necessarily have a character arc. His entire character this entire series has kind of been more like, I'm a cold-hearted Mandalorian, you know, I only care about myself, to being like more of like a dad. And that's kind of like his character arc, was kind of realizing like, I actually do kind of care about other things besides myself. That's something that is interesting. Perhaps there is something more to life than just believing in honor and, you know, making sure honor is my main thing in life. And I think that's pretty cool to kind of have him explore that type of situation throughout this entire series. And that comes to a head at the end of episode 8 of this season. So I definitely think it's very cool. So in the end, we have Apollo Creed and the trooper. They decide to stay back in town and kind of rebuild their whole mercenary slash bounty hunter society. Probably going to team up with that that other Mandalorian girl that we don't actually know her name of. I'm pretty sure that if you go online, they have a name of it. I thought that initially she was Sabine from Rebels. And I think she might still actually be, but we didn't get any real confirmation on that because Sabine was the last leader, but we don't really know. Especially when you consider at the end of this episode, we find out that the Moff, he actually has the Darksaber. And the last time we saw the Darksaber, I believe it was in the hands of Sabine. So maybe he actually already did kill Sabine and then took her Darksaber, or maybe there's more than one Darksabers, which could be possible. But it is interesting, why exactly would he have that unless he was a Mandalorian in the past? That would actually be pretty cool to kind of have this Moff guy that we think is just like a, you know, Imperial who's pretty competent, actually be like a Mandalorian killer at one point. Even crazier is, what if the Moff was the Mandalorian who saved him when he was a kid? I don't know. That'd actually be pretty crazy. Now, speaking of speculation for the next season of The Mandalorian, I'm actually going to be doing a little podcast with a friend of mine who just started up a YouTube channel, and we're going to be doing some talking about Star Wars, not just Mandalorian, but also like different type of stuff too. So make sure to like, subscribe, and turn notifications for that video. Yeah, so in the very end, the Mandalorian puts on a jetpack, he flies up there, he stops the Moff, and the Moff crashes. And as soon as the Moff crashed and they were just kind of all talking out there, I'm thinking to myself like, okay guys, that's the first rule of Star Wars. The first rule of Star Wars is, if you don't actually see a character take their last breath on screen, chances are they're still alive. We've seen this happen with Darth Maul. We've seen this happen with Boba Fett, who actually is alive in canon, and you guys have let me know through the comments and stuff that he is actually alive in canon still. And pretty much that's just the rule. If you don't see a character actually physically take their last breath and maybe even disappear into the Force, they're still alive. So when I saw that the Moff's TIE fighter crashed and it didn't explode, I was like, he's still alive. And then of course, in the very end, we see that he actually is alive. And like I mentioned earlier, he has a Darksaber, which of course would introduce the idea that maybe he is either a Mandalorian or he killed Sabine and took hers from the past. Now, I might be wrong about Sabine actually having the Darksaber last time in canon that we saw. I could be wrong. I'm not going to say I'm 100% definite on that, because honestly, I don't actually remember. It's been a while since I saw Rebels, but I do remember her kind of being handed it, and she had it for a while. So I'm going to guess that she did actually have it, and he probably killed her for it, or she might have been beaten by him, and maybe she's captured, and I don't know. I guess we'll find out in maybe season 2. I'm almost certain we'll find out in season 2. Overall, while I do have some gripes with this episode, I do think that it's a very solid season capper. It does a great job of ending the season 1 on a high note, and it really makes you wonder where season 2 is going to take it. So that is exactly what season 1 finale should do, and I think it does a good job at that. It kind of ties up a bunch of loose ends while also giving us a little taste of where season 2 might be going. And that's what we get. So I'm very happy to see that, and I'm glad that the entire season altogether was just a very solid season of television. So not only am I really excited about season 2 of The Mandalorian coming out in maybe about another year or so, but I'm also excited about the Kenobi series coming out. So overall, I think that this entire Mandalorian thing was just a great venture for Disney to take. This is the type of thing that Star Wars needed. You know, regardless of how you feel about the newer Disney films, if you hated them, if you liked them, Star Wars needed more. They needed something fresh, and I think The Mandalorian offered that in a great way. I think it introduced these new characters and kind of showed us a different side of Star Wars that we'd never seen before in a different light. So that's why I'm not only excited for season 2 of The Mandalorian, but also for the future series coming out with Disney. Especially with Jon Favreau behind a lot of the stuff, I think that they can really pull off some good stuff. So I'm definitely hyped for the future of Star Wars. What do you guys think about this series? Did you think that this was a good finale? Do you think it was a bad finale? Let me know in the comments below. Like I mentioned earlier, guys, I'm actually going to be doing a podcast on like the full Mandalorian series, as well as kind of like the future of Star Wars with a friend of mine. So if you guys want to check that out, like I said, make sure to like, subscribe, and turn notifications for more. And we're gonna have plenty more Star Wars content coming out. So thank you guys for watching. I appreciate it. And I'll catch you later. Peace.